So why would they want to kill their child? If the child has sinned, you want to send it straight to hell? Panic in the name, and it's a ritual. So for all intents and purposes, we are 1,000 years ago in a Mayan temple cutting the heads off of our children.
Oh, well, that's just a source for brainwashing. You're just being brainwashed because you're in the community and everyone believes the same thing. It's just an echo chamber. The difference. There's a lot of women, and this is I really want to touch on this. There's a lot of women that don't know about this. And all they've been told is that
or chew on my flesh, and he really doubles down on that very strong language. Obviously, this teaching would have been very shocking to the people that he was talking to because he had a...
Why did God make us need community? Why do I need church? Welcome to the Young Patriots. I'm your host, Devin Romero, with our co-host, Aidan MacArthur, and we are with two guests today, Jasmine and Mattia. Welcome to the show, guys. How are you doing?
Doing good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate your guys' time.
Okay, so let's start. Just introduce yourselves real quick and kind of introduce why you guys are on the show today.
So I'm originally from Minnesota. I go to school at UND. Just why we're here.
Yeah.
I'm Catholic. Aiden reached out and thought it would be really fun to see if we could hop on and explain.
I'm Mattia. I was born and raised here in North Dakota, so I'm basically going to college right in my backyard at the University of North Dakota. But Jasmine had invited me to join her with the podcast. I didn't know that it was happening, but I just love talking about the faith, love talking about any different ideas that I can. And so I was happy to be here and just chat and see where the conversation goes, see what you guys have to say, but I'm excited.
Perfect. Yeah, and thanks for joining. So, yeah, like you guys were saying, we're going to talk a little bit about the Catholic faith today. I think it's one of those things that a lot of people misunderstand. My mom actually grew up Catholic, so I know a little bit about it. I'm not going to say I'm the most expert person to speak on those matters. But in general, I try to keep up to date with people's beliefs and stuff. I love talking with people that I disagree with and agree with. So it's really awesome. We're going to learn a lot today. So what we wanted to start out with is just go ahead and have you guys introduce your faith. What are its core tenets? What makes it different? I think it's tenets. What are its core differences and similarities to other religions?
Yeah, so I think that a couple of main points that I wanted to hit on that are kind of common misconceptions as well. So the Eucharist is essentially the core belief of the Catholic faith. And Eucharist itself is a Greek word that means thanksgiving, but it's the teaching that we get from the Gospel of John, chapter 6, and from the Last Supper, where Jesus institutes the sacrament of the Eucharist, telling us that this is my body, this is my blood. And we get that from John chapter 6. He says, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you do not have life within you. And so we as Catholics take that literally, and we know that Jesus means that he is actually going to give us his flesh and his blood to eat. And the reason, well, one of many reasons actually that we do take that literally in that way is because John chapter 6, verse 66, maybe you've heard the devil's number, 666. That's actually where this comes from, is John 666. Because it says, after Jesus told this to the apostles and to the disciples, many of his followers left him. That's the direct quote. And then many of his followers left him. And Jesus turns to Peter and the apostles and he says, will you leave me too? And this is where we get one of Peter's professions of faith, where he says, Lord, to whom do we go? You have the words of everlasting life. And so it's pretty clear when you look at the Greek words as well, Jesus isn't just saying, you will eat my flesh in the way that we think of the word eat. It actually is a word that would be more similar to the English word of like gnaw or chew on my flesh. And he really doubles down on that very strong language. Obviously, this teaching would have been very shocking to the people that he was talking to because he had a crowd of Jewish followers who were listening to him. And Jews couldn't touch blood. They couldn't eat blood. It was unclean. They would then have to go through a huge ritual of cleansing. And so it's a very shocking teaching from our Lord that he tells them that they will eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood because even animal blood would have made them unclean. And so John chapter 6 is a great place to just kind of dive into why we believe that. But then, of course, he re-emphasizes that at the Last Supper when he says, this is my body, this is my blood, not this is a symbol of my body, this is a symbol of my blood. And so Catholics, really from the very beginning of the church, have always believed that the Eucharist is a literal union with the Lord, a literal reception of his body and blood. And that's just a couple of reasons why we believe that. The second thing is the papacy, right? We have a pope. This is something that's very different from a lot of other denominations of Christianity. And for a scriptural reason that we have that, we have St. Peter. So there's a couple of references, a couple of conversations that the Lord has with St. Peter that really emphasize Peter's role in the church, of him being the first among brothers. So we have all of the apostles are followers of Christ. All of them are priests and bishops, essentially, in what we would now have as modern terms for what their role was. But in Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, Jesus tells Peter that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. And he gives Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And Catholics interpret this as Peter having a special authority over the church to lead and guide the church. And also just from a logical perspective, it makes sense that there would be some form of authority after Jesus dies and rises and then ascends into heaven to help guide the church on earth. Because we, in our human fallen nature, we need kind of that structure. We need that support. We can kind of see that where if we don't have a fallback on what true doctrine is, on what true teaching is, it becomes very easy to subjectify things and start to kind of wonder, well, okay, I believe this, they believe that, this pastor's teaching this, that pastor's teaching this. And so having the Pope and the bishops and having the structure of councils and papal authority helps us to resolve any of those misconceptions and figure out, what does the church really teach? What was Jesus really telling us? And a second verse that I like to go to for this to kind of help me understand it is in Luke chapter 22, verse 32. This is at the Last Supper. And Jesus is telling the apostles, he tells them that someone will betray him, which is one of the 12. And then he tells Peter that Peter is going to deny him 3 times. But he follows this up by saying, you, Peter, must strengthen your brothers when you return to them. And so he's saying Peter's going to fall away, but Peter must be the one who returns and strengthens his brothers. And so we take this sentence of the Lord's to Peter directly to be another emphasis of Peter's authority, of Peter being first among brothers, because Jesus doesn't say this to John or James or any of the other apostles. He says it specifically to Peter, that Peter's role will be to return and strengthen the brothers. Another one that we wanted to talk to a little bit more, I think later on in the podcast, was the saints and Mary and what Catholics actually believe about that. And I know that Jasmine has a story that she wants to share as well, but I think we kind of want to circle back to that one on the end, so we can spend a little more time on that one. But those are a couple of the core tenets of the faith. A couple of other common controversies are sola scriptura and sola fide, solo fide. So faith alone and scripture being the only reference. The Catholic Church has a lot of tradition, and I think that I would argue most Protestant denominations do adopt their own traditions as well, but it's kind of the Catholic Church that gets a little bit of pushback on why we have so much tradition. But I think one of the biggest things when it comes to scripture would be the deuterocanonical books, or what maybe Protestants or non-Catholics would refer to as the Apocrypha, the hidden books. And so that's Tobit, Judith, Wisdom, Ecclesiastes, Baruch, Maccabees 1 and 2, and then also parts of Esther and Daniel. And Catholic Bibles have 73 books. Most Protestant Bibles that you're going to find are not going to have those 7. So other Bible versions, like maybe the King James, I typically read a Revised Standard Version, and those do have those 7 books. And there has been a lot of controversy over why Catholics have those 7 books in their Bibles, because the Jews didn't treat them as specifically canon. They would use them for teaching, they would use them to explain certain points, but they weren't considered canon in the same way that the rest of Jewish scripture was. And so this was a big debate of why Catholics have these 7 books. Did Catholics add them? Did Protestants take them out? What actually really happened there? Well, the 73 books were affirmed at the Council of Florence in 1442, which seems insanely recent in the grand scheme of the church. And it kind of can make people wonder, okay, well, if 73 books were just affirmed then, why do Catholics believe that there are 73? And why do they include these 7? But actually, if we go back to the Third Council of Carthage, which was not an ecumenical council. So what that means is it wasn't binding on the entire church. It was just for the North African church. But this was in the 3rd century, and so it was a very early council. And they list the deuterocanonical books. So they list these 7 books as part of the canon. And so even though this council wasn't technically all the church united in talking about it, it was a very important council that affirmed the belief in these 7 books. We have St. Augustine in the 4th century, who said that these books are not considered canonical by the Jews, but they are considered canonical by the Church. We have St. Jerome, who was commissioned by the Pope to translate the Latin Vulgate, and he translated all 73 books because he was commissioned by the Pope in the 3rd century to translate all 73 books. And then we just kind of from there have seen early on 3rd century, 4th century, that we've seen reaffirmed that the Catholic Church did take these books as doctrine as far back as those early church fathers, and that it wasn't something that just kind of came up in 1442. It was just officially declared again in that Council of Florence in 1442. So I think that's kind of a common misconception is, oh, well, the Catholic Church just added them in 1442. No, they were actually there before the Protestant Reformation. They were considered canon in written documents as far back as St. Augustine and St. Jerome. So that's a little bit of a brief overview. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty extensive. So we've got, like you said, the Eucharist, which is another word. I believe you guys are the faith that refers to the sacrament as the Eucharist. I'm not aware of another faith that does. But that's, for anyone that doesn't know, it's the sacrament, or communion is another term that people assign to that. And then you mentioned the papacy. Am I pronouncing that right? Or the papacy? Papacy?
I've heard both. So I probably have a bit of a Midwest accent. Say whichever one you feel like.
So that's of course that you have a pope, and that he is I forget the term. He's essentially a representative of Christ. What's the term you use?
So we'll call him the head of the church. Say that he is in persona Christi, which is Latin for in the person of Christ. Priests also, when celebrating the sacraments, are in the person of Christ. I'm not sure exactly which title you're looking for.
Yeah, it's not those ones, but it's fine. It's that general concept of that he essentially is that symbolic figure that is he represents Christ on the earth. It's interesting. Well, I guess I should also mention too in summary that you said that there are additional books. There's 7 additional books through the Apocrypha that are in the Catholic Bible compared to the Protestant Bible. And I'm trying to remember if there was anything else you had mentioned. Just as a quick summary for our viewers, because it was a lot of information for sure. So one thing that I think is very interesting, and that's kind of what we were also wanting to discuss, are some of the similarities and the differences between our faith. So for people that don't know, I think a lot of our viewers already do. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Some people call us Mormon, or other prefer Latter-day Saint, because I know it's a mouthful. So the reason I bring that up is I see so many similarities between the Catholic Church and us. Obviously, there's plenty of differences, but the similarity is we both believe in some sort of like a figurehead that has authority that's been dispensed to him from heaven. And in our situation, we call them the president of the church or a prophet. And for you guys, it's the Pope. And that structure, we are the 2 churches that are the most organized, the most structured out of any other Christian church that I'm aware of. A lot of other churches, it's very up to their local parish. It's not about a global or a national structure wherein there's doctrine that is basically passed down to some of the lesser churches. It's just more of a scattered group of individual churches, and it's really the pastor that is the head of the church. And maybe that's different for various denominations, but for today's conversation, I think it's straightforward enough to say and true enough to say that the Catholic Church and our church are 2 of the most well-structured organizations. And I kind of want to use that as a segue into a comment that I get a lot from people, and that is, why do I need church? I'm curious to hear your guys' opinion. Why do you think that it's important for people to have a church? Is it just about tithing money? Is it just about, alms and recognition and power? Or is this about a bigger message? Is this essential for the kingdom of God to exist and thrive on the earth?
My mind kind of goes to Acts, where we hear that the early Christians committed themselves to community, committed themselves to the breaking of the bread. We kind of see right away this structure. And I think that leaving all theology aside, leaving all of the deep explanations that we could go to, we as humans need someone. We need something physical. Like, we're body and soul. We're not just a spirit. like the angels are. And so we thrive off of community. We were made for community. We hear Jesus's prayer for unity before he goes to the agony of the garden and the crucifixion. We hear how he prays for unity among Christians, among his followers. And I think that the church and flowing into that authority helps us to get that, because if we just try to interpret things on our own or try to do everything on our own, we're not going to succeed. And even if we try and pursue Christ in faith by ourselves, it's a hard thing to do, right? Jesus tells us, pick up your cross and follow me. And so by having a church that has structure and authority, we're going to a place where we're able to be filled up by Jesus in such a special way that is different from me just, oh, I'm going to pick up my Bible and I'm going to read it by myself, and that's going to be my only source of the Lord. And that's a beautiful thing. You should read your Bible by yourself and have that prayer one-on-one with the Lord, but also just that community and that sense of who we are together as a church. Like he's my Father in heaven, but he's also our Father in heaven. And so I think that I kind of lean on that community, and that's why the church is so important. And it's just one of many reasons, but it's really what comes to mind right away.
That's awesome. Yeah, Jasmine, what are some of your thoughts?
I don't. Okay. It basically it basically is with all of the community and everything. It makes it feel so much like a family, like a real home. Especially like from people who come from broken homes, like where you don't get like that family feeling. Coming to church and just like seeing all of your brothers and sisters like coming together to receive Eucharist for our father, for our mother. It's really interesting to see. And yeah, that's like one of the reasons why I prefer like even like joining Bible studies and everything, is so that I'm not only getting like one interpretation of it, like my own, because I'll interpret something different than like somebody else. Just coming here, listening to like Father explaining something, and just having like the discussions afterwards, explaining things, like, yeah.
And just for people that don't know, when you're saying father, you're referring to the, if I'm not mistaken, it's your priest, right?
Yes.
Okay, so he's the leader of your local parish. So he's like your pastor, essentially.
Yes.
Okay. So I love that you guys brought that up. So what you're bringing up are a couple of different things. I'm going to connect some dots there for people that are listening. So you're looking at community and connection. And I want to bring up something that I think some people will ask, like, well, why did God make us need community? Well, to be frank, you're not getting into heaven if you're not serving your fellow brothers and sisters. You know, like what God said was there were people on his left hand and his right hand. He's basically like telling a prophecy of when he's at the judgment day judging. And there are people on his left hand and his right, and the people on his right hand, he basically thanks them for having visited him when he was in prison and when he was sick, and given him food when he was hungry, given him clothing when he was uncovered, like all these different things. And they're like, oh, Lord, when did we do that? And he says, yea, verily, even as ye have done it unto the least of these thy brethren, ye have done it unto me. So if you have done kindness to your fellow neighbors, it's as if you did it to Christ, because we are all his children. He wants us to all look after. I mean, imagine if you're a parent, you want all your kids, if you're a good parent, to get along, to love each other, and to become better people by their interactions. If you are God, you would want the same thing in a holier and purer way. And so basically, that community is not an arbitrary thing that he put in us. He put it in us because we need it in order for our civilization to grow, but also more importantly, the civilization of God to grow. We need to serve our fellow brothers and sisters. If we didn't need community, we'd probably just be hermits, and we'd be living lonesome lives, and maybe we could be, living a good, righteous life, but we're living an unfulfilling life. So it's basically, he set us up to have a fulfilling life in a spiritual sense. Then the other thing you guys are mentioning is the Eucharist. So how are you going to have the sacrament? How are you going to have communion or the Eucharist on your own? And of course, that part of that comes down to authority. We believe that there's authority, both of our faiths, that there's an authority that allows you. You can't just do it at home. You can't just baptize at home. You can't go up to your neighbor Pete and be like, hey, Uncle Pete, I need you to baptize me, Like it's not going to work that way. There needs to be an authoritative process. And then part of that is that God is a God of order. His house is a house of order. Satan's house is a house of chaos. His house is crumbling and falling apart. And any person that follows after one or the other house, and there's no middle ground, there's no middle house. Anyone that's following after one or the other house, their lives reflect the same. You know, it's like the fruits of the Spirit, basically. Christ's fruit will resonate and will be produced in you as you're seeking after him. So, yeah, you can be a good person on your own, but you're not able to have access to the sacrament, what's the Eucharist, and you're passing up this amazing community of, you know, common believers that are trying to encourage you, hey, keep on that straight and narrow path, keep pushing forward. Don't let that tragedy or that trial distract you from the truth. So it's really awesome. And it's interesting to see how people can change that and twist it and say, oh, well, that's just a source for brainwashing. You're just being brainwashed because you're in a community and everyone believes the same thing. It's just an echo chamber. And it's like, I don't know about you guys, but I've been to church meetings where people get up and they're like, I'm really struggling right now. I don't know if, I guess you guys don't really have that same format in your churches, but you might talk to people in your church where they're like, I'm really struggling and I don't know what to do, and I don't know if my faith is strong enough for me to carry through, for me to hold fast. And what do you probably say to them? You know, probably something I would say, which is, well, your faith might not be strong enough, so trust in God's faith in the truth and in his plan. Let his faith carry you. Trust in his power. And you don't get that if you just stay by yourself. You're just gonna get lost in your own depression. So I kind of want to just kind of connect some of those dots. You absolutely hit the nail on the head. That's exactly the way I would have answered it as well. So let's go ahead and move on to something that might be a little controversial for people. We've kind of talked about it quite a bit in our podcast, so we don't want to beat a dead horse. But I want to hear what your guys' take is on modern Catholics, I would say, that I have at least heard of. I don't know if I've really ever had a conversation with someone who has these beliefs. Someone who's Catholic that believes that abortion is acceptable before the Lord. What are your guys' takes on abortion? What is your stance on someone that is a Catholic that believes in abortion? And what does that mean for the faith?
So obviously as Catholics, we believe that Jesus created you in the womb. He knit you. It's like a 1 in like 400,000 something chance that you would be brought to this earth. If God did not want you here, you would not be here. You would not exist. So being here in itself is a miracle. How I think about like the modern Catholics that don't believe that believes that it's all right. I just don't, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like our entire foundation basically like on that is, oh my gosh, I forgot somebody's talking and I don't know where I was going with that. Shoot, can you do it over?
The Catholic doctrine, Catholic teaching is that abortion is wrong. And so I remember I was in Washington, D.C., and there was a flyer up of Catholics for Choice. And I read it and I like laughed in the most sad way because I was like, actually, that you can't say that it's Catholics for Choice because there is no theological backing to that is not backed by the Catholic Church. And so therefore, there is no such thing as an organization of Catholics for Choice, because a Catholic who claims to be for abortion is choosing to live in sin, and they should know that. I think that a lot of times there is kind of a disconnect between how well we are evangelized, how well we are catechized, and what people believe. And so maybe they don't know that the Catholic teaching is that abortion is wrong. But Jasmine kind of explained why the Catholic teaching is that way, that abortion is a sin, that it is taking the life of a human child, which we can see, this can all be defined right from a secular viewpoint, that the unborn child is a human being. And I'm happy to get into that, but I think that's a little bit of a side tangent. And so instead, the Catholic Church has the authoritative doctrine that no, abortion is a sin. And so this organization, which is actually like somewhat of a thing of Catholics for Choice, I don't consider it a Catholic organization at all, and I don't think that any Catholic in good standing would, because it directly goes against Catholic doctrine. So we have scripture, we have the Bible, and then we also have the Catechism. And the Catechism is a great book that kind of helps just make sense of what Catholics actually believe, how we interpret scripture, the reason that we have the sacraments, and it really dives into, you'll hear a lot from maybe saints like St. Augustine, St. Jerome that I mentioned earlier, these early people in the Christian church and what they believed. You'll get writings from them, and it kind of just condenses what Catholics believe into one book. And right there in the Catechism, we see that abortion is sin. And I've even heard it compared and seen it compared to abortion being Satan's sacrament. Because as I was saying earlier, the Lord tells us, this is my body given up for you. And abortion is the direct inverse of that. It is, I am going to give up your life so that I can have my life. And that is a complete twisting and a complete inverse of the Christian way of life. And so a belief in abortion is not compatible with a life of virtue. Obviously, we're at different points in our faith life with Jesus. Obviously, people make mistakes. Obviously, the Lord can forgive that. But the teaching itself of, oh, abortion is fine. Oh, abortion isn't wrong. Oh, I'm Catholics for abortion is not at all a church teaching or something that could ever be compatible with the Catholic faith.
Yeah, that's what I figured. When I first heard that there was such thing as Catholics for abortion, my first thought was like, okay, but the Catholics like to baptize their kids when they're super young because of original sin and all that, right? So why would they want to kill their child if the child has sinned? You want to send it straight to hell? It confused me, and maybe I'm getting some pieces of doctrine mixed up, but you had a wonderful explanation, both of you. That was very eloquent, and I've seen the video you guys are talking about too, where that man is talking about how it's Satan's sacrament, abortion.
So something that I think is concerning is, and again, not everyone's doing it for this reason. I think there are higher ups, like people in Planned Parenthood, that are intentionally doing it for these reasons. I mean, for instance, I want to give some attention that people don't know about. Margaret Sanger, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood, was extremely racist. She founded Planned Parenthood for the sole intent of eliminating the black population. That's what they set out as their main goal. Now, you can argue about whether they administer to that today. She literally received a letter, and I think it was on behalf of Planned Parenthood, from the Nazi Party in Germany, congratulating her for her efforts in eliminating the inferior races of the world. And Glenn Beck has that in his library. I think that's pretty insane. So basically, I also came across a company, and I can't remember for the life of me, I was trying to look it up right now, that basically posted, I think it was on Instagram or Facebook, the instructions on how to conduct a satanic sacrament worship of abortion. And I was horrified. It, like, line by line, and I read it just to be like, what the heck is this? And sure enough, it's exactly the way you explained it. And shortly thereafter, I had seen the video you're talking about. And I was just like, wow. I feel like that was God putting that in my path to warn and to give me that resource of, this is what it truly is. It truly is identical to the times of Baal and Moloch in the Old Testament, where mothers offered up their children on burning sacrifice altars. And I always thought as a kid, I'm like, I'm so glad that we're past that day. Like, that's just like blatantly misguided or evil. It depends on the intention of the person, I would say. But then I realized one day, I'm like, wait, that's identical to abortion. The problem is it's so covert, because it happens before they're born, that it's really easy for you to think like, okay, well, that's just a medical practice. That's because you're not putting your baby on an altar and setting them ablaze like they did in the old days. But it's functionally the same thing. Now, here's the difference. There's a lot of women, and I really want to touch on this. There's a lot of women that don't know about this. And all they've been told is that because of feminist doctrine, which we have some productions that are coming out soon about that. It'll take a while for us to produce, but we're working on it. The feminist doctrine teaches women that in order for you to be like a man, You need to be able to have sex out of wedlock and then terminate the life of that baby so that you don't have to worry about being tied down. Because the last thing you want as a woman is to become a mother. And that's, frankly, that's a satanic doctrine. It's evil, okay? So the doctrine is evil. The fruit of the doctrine is evil. The person is not necessarily evil. So a mother that goes and gets an abortion, has she sinned? I mean, I would say yes. That's what I would say. Now, did she knowingly sin? Not necessarily. It depends on if she knows what the truth is. Someone that was raised a Christian, I think they would knowingly sin at that point. Are they evil? I don't think so. I think you're evil when you start celebrating the death of those babies, which I have seen women do. Women minimizing the life of those children and saying, hey, this is my 10th abortion that I'm getting and I couldn't be happier. Or like there's things that people have said that they're intentionally making light of the life that they created intentionally. And that rules out rape and incest and all these other situations, okay? So I'm ruling out those. They intentionally created the life, and they are intentionally killing the life. Those are the people, I think, that have committed an evil act. And I think their heart is corroding. I don't say this to say, oh, that person's a bad person. That person should feel ashamed. I'm not about that. What I do want is for them to come to Christ. I do want them to repent. And all repentance means it's not punishment. It is changing your heart. It is opening your heart to Christ. And if you receive Christ into your heart, he makes you new. And he makes you into a person that is your best self. It's also painful. It's very difficult. So what are your guys' views on the woman who commits an abortion, whether they're Catholic or not?
I honestly just take so much pity on her. That is a terrible thing to go through. Losing a child is one of the most painful things. But just it's losing a part of yourself, like a part of you, something that you created dies. That's very unfortunate. And I have actually heard testimonies from a lot of women who have instantly regretted it. They regretted it as soon as they walked into the room. And physically, yes, it hurt, but they have just become so depressed. And I have been aware of a couple that have taken their own lives because of how hard it was losing their own child.
I think a lot of it kind of comes back to what you were saying of separating the evil action from that person is evil, right? This woman, the abortion was wrong, regardless of what her intentions were, regardless of what she felt like going into it. The abortion itself, taking the life of that innocent unborn child, no matter the circumstance, was wrong. But that doesn't mean that we then cast all the blame on that woman and take away the gravity of her situation. Maybe I shouldn't say nobody, because you did talk about how there are women who do celebrate their abortions, but almost nobody wants to ever get an abortion. It's not something that is like a life goal of these young women. It's a heartbreaking decision that they oftentimes make out of heartbreaking circumstances, but that does not mean that it was okay or dismissible. The action itself is evil. That doesn't mean the person is evil.
So a lot of women, and this is something that I really admire about Glenn Beck, is he oh gosh, and I'm trying to remember what the name of the foundation is, but there's a nonprofit that they try to set up shop around Planned Parenthoods. So right as women are looking in their most desperate hour for a solution, instead of going to Planned Parenthood, across the street is this facility that, what do they offer? Well, they're not trying to like badmouth her and try to make her feel guilty. What they're doing is they're saying, we're going to help you. What do you need? And so they give strollers. They give cars. There was literally a lady that walked into one of these places and was just like, I don't have a car seat. I can't take my kid with me to work. And she's a single mom. And so she was going to have an abortion. And you think that might sound silly, but it's like, they want to be a good mother. And they're feeling like they can't. They're feeling like they're hopeless and that the baby's life is better without them being their mother. Without that woman being the caretaker. And that's such a tragic thing to realize. And if you miss that when you're having this conversation, I think that in and of itself is a sin, in the sense that God told us to love our neighbor. That doesn't mean condone their acts, but it does mean to live in their shoes, to have realistic empathy, and to to love them as Christ would and to serve them as Christ would. And when any time that we pass that up, we miss the mark. We miss that mark. And that's what sin means, is just to miss. It's actually an archery term. People, they feel so emotionally attached to sin means I'm a bad person. No, sin means you're human. But God's trying to heal you from your humanity and make you something better. And only He can do that. I want to move on for a second. What were your thoughts?
We're still on the abortion topic, right?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I haven't been paying attention because our fantastic researcher just pulled up. That sounded sarcastic. He's actually amazing. Pulled up the flyer about that satanic abortion.
Did you really?
Ritual.
Who is it?
It's
Oh, well, that's
Yeah.
why. That makes absolute sense. Interesting. Okay. Well, I
Yeah.
guess it wasn't a company. That's interesting. Or
it's some sort of organization
Yeah.
with satanic in the name, and it's a ritual. So for all intents and purposes, we are 1,000 years ago in a Mayan temple cutting the heads off of our children.
I wouldn't read through it, just so you know. I think it's what you're about to do.
I wanted to say one line here.
Okay,
I
that's
found
fine.
one line. I wasn't going to read all of it.
It's not
because
super graphic.
It's not. It's just a waste of time.
It really is spiritually harmful. So, but go ahead.
Yeah. So essentially, it's just going through the ritual of how to terminate someone's child. This big old long list of things. They got quotes and chantations of affirmation and being proud of what these women are doing. And there's one line in here that says, your ability to choose to terminate a pregnancy is consistent with the ideals of liberty and freedom. So exactly what we were talking
Huge
about.
lie.
Yeah,
Huge lie.
That's I got so many words in my head that if I said them and then died right now, I wouldn't go to heaven. It's
That's
exactly
not
what
great
we
either,
were talking about. It's this toxic mentality that women are being force fed through media and through celebrities, that they are a superior being to God, to their children, to their husbands, to men. And it is much worse than toxic masculinity. Both are bad, but toxic feminism is worse. So
Because it takes the child with it.
takes the child with it. Yeah.
Whether it's through abortion or whether it's through indoctrination, the mother is who's going to have typically the most contact with the child, and the child will grow up to be the next generation. So it's taking two lives instead of just one. No, but that's not us condoning men that are toxic. What we're saying is that it doesn't get as the same attention. It's not getting equal attention. So
Yeah.
no,
It's
so
totally atrocious.
The whole
So
concept of that
look into
ritual, that whole concept is it basically is overriding your guilt. That's one of the main goals, is don't feel bad about it. That's what it's trying to tell you to do. The other thing is feel proud about it. The other thing is respect yourself because of it. Like you start, like it said, that it's an element of freedom. Well, it's my body, my choice. I'm pro-choice. I have a right to choose. You don't get to have a choice on who lives and dies.
Exactly, and that's also like a bit major issue with like the feminist movement is like God created sex for a reason. If you are not responsible to have a child, do not have sex. That is saved for married couples for a reason. And I feel like, especially like in the, I think it was like the 70s or 80s was when that like really like took off. Like, you don't need a man, just go off and have fun, do whatever you want. Consequences, there are none, because you can just get it fixed, in quotations.
That is, I think, what you get to. So when you have a conversation with someone who, and I've watched hundreds of videos of this conversation, you have a conversation with someone who is saying, well, my body, my choice, not someone that's curious and asking like, hey, is this right? Is this right? Is this wrong? But someone who's like defiantly angry at someone that's saying abortion's wrong. A lot of times those conversations devolve into my body, my choice. And then we're like, well, what about the baby's choice? Because it's their body. No, it's my body. You keep trying to get like down to the nitty gritty. What is the reason that someone is trying to defend abortion, not someone that's just, okay, I think it's right, but I'm not going to like argue with someone that disagrees. Someone that's passionately for abortion and is trying to support it with everything they can and is arguing with people that don't support it. What it ends up getting down to is people are not willing to take your advice, Jasmine. People want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be able to enjoy free sex with whoever they want and not commit to a person, which in and of itself is harmful. But on top of that, when something inconvenient comes of that, they want to end the inconvenience. It is a worship of self at its core, regardless of whether most women are doing it for that reason. So the reason I am bringing such attention to this is because it is one of the greatest evils that is going on in our day, and it is destroying thousands of lives. Well, millions of lives, but it's destroying thousands of families. And it's breaking hearts, and it is Satan's greatest weapon against God and against humanity. Because one of those babies could have been the next Martin Luther King Jr. One of those babies could have been the next leader that moved people to change. The next leader to develop a cure for some terminal illness. The next leader to inspire lives that otherwise would have committed suicide. And you terminate all of that. You don't just kill one life, you kill many. And those lives ripple through time. Between abortion and suicide, they're one of my most tender issues that they break my heart. And I'm trying to do what I can to bring awareness to it. So I appreciate you guys being willing to talk about it. It's also a very difficult topic to discuss, especially since people get so... I mean, think about it. If you've had an abortion, the moment someone says these things, the ultimate payload of guilt just falls on your shoulders.
Yeah, it's especially hard. Like I have members of my own family that are Catholic and also like are pro-choice as well. So just hearing them trying to explain that to me is just absolutely heartbreaking, because they also do use the my body, my choice argument. The baby is 50% of your DNA. That is not a full 100%. That is not your life to take away. Otherwise, like the main argument with them is like, what if it is? Like, what if the baby is conceived in rape? That one is also like a major argument I hear. But what does the way that you were conceived? Thank you. I was trying to say conception, but that didn't work. Why does the way that you were conceived determine your worth?
Well, and even if it did determine it, that's 1%, probably less than that. But what I've always been shown statistically is that it's 1% of the cases of abortion is either rape, incest, or risk of the mother's life. So why are we debating this on a 1% issue? Because that's the exception, not the rule. So we need to protect abortion because of those rare circumstances. Well, then just allow it in those circumstances.
Well, I'll tell you why we keep having the 1% argument. It's because deep down, every single pro-choice person knows that abortion is wrong. Even if they don't openly admit it, even if they don't consciously know it, their soul still does. So subconsciously, they think, if we can win a 1% argument, that's just one step closer to our overall argument. I think that's what subconsciously goes through a lot of minds.
Well, and it's
when they're arguing.
It's a lot. It's like the argument of, well, there's a trolley going down a line and it's going to go and kill 5 people, but if you switch the track, it'll go and only kill 1 person. Like, which are you going to do? It's that type of, I think, stupid framework, but it's that type of logic of, well, it sounds like it's better to just kill 1 person than to kill 5. You know? And I'm not going to make my claim on what I think about that situation. I think the situation's stupid, but I'm using it to kind of prove a point of, it sounds empathetic. It sounds empathetic, and that's why it's so convincing. because everyone's like, yeah, no, I don't want that mother to suffer because of those things. It was out of their control that they were raped. But I think there's other solutions. We're not quite giving it enough thought and proper attention as a nation. Something I wanted to switch to real quick, and we'll briefly talk about this. Harrison Butker. Proud man he should be in regard to having stood for his faith and stood for the truth. That man went to a university, it looks like Benedictine College, which is a Catholic liberal arts school. He gave a speech in May of 24, and the world lost its dang mind. And I love it. In it, I remember when I think I watched it before the controversy, and I was like, this dude's based. And then all of a sudden, all this controversy came out, and I'm just like, of course. But basically, he said, okay, so all of you women out there in the audience, he basically says, above all of your proud achievements, I believe you most anticipate, I imagine you most anticipate that achievement that will be becoming a mother, a wife and mother. And the world lost its mind. It's like as if he said, women, you are worthless in the workplace, but you better go work in that kitchen and make me a sandwich, lady. Like that's what he was made out to be. They told everyone that's who Harrison Butker is. He should be defamed. He should be discriminated against. He should be hated upon. Also, want to contrast when Christ tells Christians, hey, you might be threatened or mistreated by someone, but still go love him. Still go love that person. Still go love her and tell her that you forgive her. Tell him that you forgive him. It's just interesting to contrast that with the world's approach of, no, if someone disagrees with you and tells you you're wrong, hate them. Burn their Tesla down. Burn their house down. Throw Molotov cocktails through their storefront. And I'm not trying to shame. I just am contrasting the difference between light and dark. So love your enemies. General rule of thumb. But yeah, Harrison Butker, I'm proud of him. He did a great job. But he basically he spoke truth. He talked about the ills of pornography and other abortion. I think he brought up too. It's been a long time. Again, I think it's been 2 years since I watched that. But I would invite people to go and watch that. We'll put a card up above here for people to go and click on it and view that interview. It's like that speech. It's like 24 minutes long. But yeah, he wasn't saying any of those things that people made him out to say. And actually, funny enough, there were other things he said that I thought were a lot more offensive to the world, and people didn't bring attention to that. They were really upset about him saying that a woman's proudest achievement is likely, in her own opinion. He wasn't speaking for them. He was saying, in her own opinion, a woman's most proud achievement is that of being a mother. And I think for 80% of women, that's true. For 90% of women. And honestly, for a lot of those that it's not the truth for, they get to their 30s and 40s and then realize they can't have kids anymore because the longer you wait, the less likely it is for you to actually be pregnant. And then they realize with regret that they can no longer have that opportunity. So I think it's a lot more universal than people make it out to be. But that's fine. You can still work. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not trying to kick you out of the workplace. This is not a patriarchal society that tells women what they can and cannot do. So there are problems with our society, but that's not one of them.
And let's be honest, women are way better at being nice and caring than us men. And quite frankly, they do cook better on average, not because it's a woman's role, but because it has to do with the care and the appreciation and the love they put into what they do. I think it's just natural. So we're going to close with, as you kind of alluded to, Mattia, the misconceptions that surround sainthood. I'm not aware. I think it's only the Catholic faith that really has the sainthood doctrine. So, I mean, and I told Jasmine this when we were doing the pre-show interview. I think our two faiths are the most persecuted in Christian history, the most discriminated against in regard to. I mean, people have literally called you guys idolaters. And I don't agree with that label. So I just wanted to hear what your guys' opinion is on that. Kind of give you a chance to just
defend your beliefs, defend your faith. So
Yeah, I think kind of right off the bat is just defining what worship is versus what intercessory prayer is. Because sometimes I think that a lot less people now, more people are starting to understand that Catholics don't worship Mary and don't worship the saints. At least that's what it's felt like in some of the conversations that I've had, as people are starting to understand what that is. But now they're very wary of, oh, well, you don't talk to dead people. And so right off the bat, we can say, well, Catholics don't worship Mary. Catholics don't worship the saints. So we can clear the air on that. We worship God alone. And so we don't worship Mary and we don't worship the saints, but we honor them in a very special way. And where do we get this idea from that we can turn to the saints, that we can turn to Mary for intercession, and that they can help us? Because a lot of times what I'll hear from people is, oh, well, we don't talk to dead people. Like, dead people can't hear you. That's necromancy. That's bad. That's evil. What are Catholics really doing? Where do we get this doctrine? We can turn to Matthew 22, and Jesus tells us, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay, so he's quoting Old Testament scripture here. God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But we're hearing him say this at a time when Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are dead. And the Lord tells us, I am the God of the living, not the God of the dead. And so this.
So you were just talking about the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and how he is the God of the living, not the God of the dead.
Yes. Yeah, and so we turn to them for intercession because they are now close to the Lord. They're in relationship with him. They're in heaven with him. And so just like I would ask my mom to pray for me if I'm having a hard time, like I would ask my church community to pray for me, I also ask the saints and I ask Mary to pray for me as well. We see in Hebrews that the assembly of all the firstborn enrolled in heaven are with the Lord. When you approach God, you're approaching not only God, but you're approaching the holy ones, or the saints. We see that in Hebrews chapter 12, then in Revelation 5 and 8. In Revelation chapter 5, verse 8, we hear each of the elders held a harp and gold bowls filled with incense, which are the prayers of the holy ones. So the elders are these people in heaven with the Lord before the throne, praising him, and they're lifting up the prayers, and the incense is rising to heaven. So they're lifting up the prayers of the faithful on earth to God in heaven because they are there with him, present at the altar, at the throne. And this is reaffirmed again in chapter 8, in verse 4. So then in Revelation 12, we have the story of the woman, Mary, and her offspring, Jesus, and we see that Mary is protected in a special way. The child is brought up to heaven as the dragon pursues the woman. And the key thing here that I want to note, I know that Revelation is a very poetic written story. It's very different from like the narrative books of the Bible, but we see that the dragon pursues the rest of the women's offspring. In Revelation 12:17, then the dragon became angry with the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commandments and bear witness to Jesus. So right there in Revelation, who are the rest of the woman's offspring? Us, the Christian church, right? We are Mary's offspring. And if this is just some symbolic thing, why does it matter? Why do we have John chapter 19, verse 26 and 27, woman, behold your son, behold your mother, where Jesus tells John that this is his mother too? Why do we have these verses telling us that Mary is our mother if we are not to turn to her as we would to a mother? Mary is the perfect mother. She's in heaven. She's with the Lord. She has been raised through the power of God to perfection in a way that us here still on earth are not. We're fallen. We fall into sin. And even in the Gospel of John, something that it's my favorite gospel and I absolutely love, John always refers to himself as the beloved. He doesn't call himself by his name of John. And one reason that he does this is so that we, as we read the gospel, can put ourselves in John's shoes. We can be the beloved disciple. We can be the beloved of Jesus. And following that to its natural conclusion, then we would also be the children of Mary, because Mary is given to the beloved disciple. Mary is given to John. And if he's intending for us to put ourselves in his shoes as we read his Bible by not calling himself by the name John, but by calling himself the beloved, then Mary is our mother as well. She's given to us by Jesus at the foot of the cross, not just to John.
That's powerful. So you're essentially saying, and you're not exactly saying this actually, so I'm going to twist it a little bit. You're in a way saying that Mary is a symbol of the church in the moment that Christ gives Mary to John to take care of. And so John, us being put in his shoes as a beloved son or daughter of God, we are responsible to take care of the church. We are responsible to watch after those in the church and to make sure that wickedness and temptation does not enter therein. Like, yeah, that's really cool. So you didn't exactly say that, but that's what I was hearing as you did say that. And I thought that was really fascinating and profound. But so you guys believe that we are, in a way, children of Mary because she is the mother of God. Is that kind of the concept? Okay. I'd be curious to see. So that's one thing that I think is fascinating. So I didn't know about transubstantiation. We talked about that a little bit in the beginning with the Eucharist literally turning into the body and blood of Christ. I didn't know about that until I think like a year, 2 or so years ago. I was in a religion class, and that was fascinating to learn about. And it sounds like a lot of Christian denominations believe that. So it's interesting to see like what faiths do and what faiths don't have those crossovers and where the lines intersect and everything. So I'd be interested to see if that's unique to the Catholic faith, or if there's Baptists and other Protestants that believe likewise or maybe similar. I know I've seen other churches that they'll name their church something after Mary or whatnot, or maybe that's just the Catholic. Or is it your guys' faith that you have like each church has a unique name?
Yes. So one of ours here is also, or my church back home is Immaculate Conception, and then we have like St. Mary's Church. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so maybe I'm just thinking of other Catholic churches.
There will, so like the Anglican Church or the Church of Ireland. I think sometimes those churches that are more traditional in the sense of how they perform their liturgies tend to be more likely to name their church after the saint. So like St. Patrick's in Ireland is not a Catholic. Dublin is not a Catholic church. It's Anglican. And so I've found that churches like that are more likely to call their churches by the name of saints in the way that Catholic churches do. But I see it less often in the States, I would say.
Yeah, that's more of a European thing. I understand. That's awesome.
I have a much broader point I kind of want to make here, I guess, before we start wrapping up. But I'm sitting here listening to you guys, and I am finally hearing some explanations for some of the beliefs I've heard. And I don't think it's anything new. Let me rephrase that. I think it's kind of common to hear other beliefs and be like, that's kind of weird. And then we start judging. We start trying to interpret scripture on behalf of whoever we heard the belief from. And my buddy converted from being a member of our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to Catholicism. So for a while, I've been kind of interested in it, and listening to you guys actually explain it, it's actually pretty eye-opening just to hear where you're coming from, and I really appreciate it. And I think that's a lost skill these days. Like Devin was saying earlier, both of our denominations have been pretty heavily attacked, and it's really just because people don't understand where we're coming from. And it's really pathetic of someone to just judge based off what they hear. And we so easily do that these days. So if you guys are watching this and you got, you hear weird things about Catholics, about Mormons, about the left or the right, whatever, just take a second and learn about it. Like, I don't think people are inherently evil and want to be jerks and want to mislead. I think there's just lots to learn about the people around us.
That's true. Well, and that's why we have these types of conversations. Obviously, we believe that healing in our nation will be found through Christ. So we want to give a spotlight to religion. We don't want to just talk about Christianity. We're also going to have people of other faiths on at some point in the show. And the whole point is just learning that we're a lot more similar than we think we are. You might see a label. You might see, oh, you're a Democrat. Oh, you're a Republican. Oh, you're this. Oh, you're that. And immediately your defensive mechanism in your brain kicks on. This is psychologically proven. And you start thinking of threat. It's your threat analysis. And you treat that person very differently. The moment you hear their voice first. They did this recently. There was a social psychologist, I think, that he put up 2 telephones. It was like a payphone. They put one in San Francisco, and it says call conservative. They put one up in Aberdeen, Texas, I think it was. It says call liberal, and it phones to the other machine. And so it'll start ringing in San Francisco, and someone in Texas, goes to make a call. And of all of the calls they had, none of the participants ever resorted to violent words and hateful rhetoric. That's mind-blowing to me. Like, you think about the contrast between those two cities, and then you having a phone call between the two. The moment you hear the person's voice, your threat analysis goes down, and you start actually having the empathetic part of your brain kick in. And it's just so healing to see that's the case. The moment it's like a social media post, all that's out the window. You could just like, without reservation, you just think you can say all the hateful stuff you want to and not feel any guilt from it. And it's because you never heard their voice, you never saw their face, you never interacted with them in a community way, in a community method. So thanks for all of your guys' time. Do you have any other further questions or comments you want to make real quick before we wrap up here? We got like a minute or so left.
Not really. There is a couple good movies that I have watched that I know that actually has converted a couple people from pro-choice to pro-life. The first one is called Unplanned. It's about a woman raised Catholic, went to an abortion facility, worked there for I think like 8-something years, raised her own kids and everything, then witnessed an abortion for the first time. She worked her way all the way up, won a national award through that, and found her way to the Coalition for Life, who saved her, and now she's one of the biggest advocates I've ever met. And it's actually just such an inspiring story, and it actually does show in there a true abortion that does happen. It is like a real life one in the movie that they show.
It's not an actual abortion, but it is through the same process.
Actual, I think so.
No, they use CGI when they're in the operating room. So that it is based on her telling of the story. So she recounts that, or she recalls that there was a baby that was physically resisting the tube that eviscerates the baby, and was fighting back. But all that was CGI and special effects. So there's nothing on there that's an actual abortion. It would probably be contrary to the very spirit of the movie to do so, to like replicate it just for that. But the story that it tells is based on a true story, and it's very realistic. Yep, I can attest to that. Yeah, I think so. And you're kind of going along the lines of something that Aiden has said before. I think people need to actually expose themselves to this content. We're not going to do that for people. We will let you make that decision. We're not going to show the graphicness of an abortion on this channel. But we do invite you to do research. We do invite you to learn about the methods that these things happen. Become informed. Even if you're pro-choice, understand what you're talking about. I mean, if you're going to, for instance, if you're going to be advocating for the war in Iran or against the war in Iran, you better know something about Iran. You better know something about foreign policy and how that impacts the world. You can't just make a declaration of, I think it's wrong, I think it's right, this is the greatest thing ever, this is the worst thing ever. Like, you can't just make those claims and actually have an educated opinion. You're being irresponsible. You need to do the research. And I think with research comes light and understanding. And then, let's talk about it. If you have resources that you believe puts you in a place of authority. So, so we're going to go ahead and end the show there. We, again, want to thank you, Jasmine and Mattia, for joining the channel to talk about your faith. We look forward to having you guys on in the future as well. Just let us know if you'd like to be a guest again. And for those that were watching, please leave your comments down below. If you have any questions, please ask. This is a difficult conversation. Some of these things we discussed, you might have learned something new. Go ahead and feel free to share that. And share this video with a friend so that they can also learn some new things about different faiths. Have a good day.